I was sleeping behind a gas station. Then he offered me a warm bed. I used to sleep behind a gas station. Not exactly glamorous, I know. But when you've been kicked out of your house with nothing but a backpack and $28, you learn to stop thinking about glamour. You start thinking about shelter, safety, somewhere people won't call the cops. That gas station had a small corner in the back, just big enough for a body to curl into. The trash bin smelled, but the lights above made me feel like someone might notice if something happened to me. It was better than the alley, and better than going back to him, my ex-boyfriend, the one who gave me bruises like gifts and love like a loaded gun. I was 19 and invisible. No ID, no phone, no home, no one. Until the night he found me. His name was Daniel. I remember it so clearly. The night was freezing. My jacket had holes in both elbows. I was shaking so hard my teeth clacked. He pulled up in a black car, stepped out slowly, and said, "Are you okay?" I wanted to run, but I was too tired to be scared. Too broken to lie. "Not really," I said, voice hoarse. He crouched down. "Do you need a place to stay tonight?" I stared at him. He was clean, sharp, not flashy, but safe. The kind of man who probably wore cologne and used hand sanitizer after shaking hands. Not the kind who lingered behind gas stations. "I don't have money," I whispered. He smiled gently. "I'm not asking for that." Then he pulled off his coat and placed it over my shoulders. And in that moment, I felt warm for the first time in weeks. He didn't ask too many questions. He took me to a diner first. Let me order whatever I wanted, which was just soup and toast because my stomach wasn't used to food anymore. He watched me eat like I was a fragile bird, and when I apologized for the way I looked, he just shook his head and said, "You don't owe anyone an apology." That night, he brought me to his apartment. It was modest, but clean. Warm. Smelled like cinnamon and something else I couldn't place. Maybe safety. "You can take the bed," he said. "I'll sleep on the couch." I was too tired to argue. But I didn't sleep. Not really. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what he wanted. Because no one does something for nothing. Not in my world. But the morning came. And he didn't ask for anything. He made eggs, offered me coffee, said I could stay until I figured things out. "You don't have to be out there anymore," he said. "Not while I have space." And I believed him. Because sometimes when you've been drowning so long, even a hand reaching down to pull you up feels like love. I stayed. One night turned into two. Then a week, then a month. He bought me a phone, helped me apply for jobs, let me cry in the middle of the night when the past crept into my bones. And when he kissed me for the first time, soft, hesitant, gentle, I didn't pull away. Because for the first time, I felt like maybe I mattered to someone. He was patient, protective. And when he said, "I think we could build something together," I believed him. So when he asked me to move in officially, I said yes. When he suggested we get married after 6 months, I said yes. Because I thought, maybe I'm not broken anymore. Maybe I finally found someone who sees me. But what I didn't see was that every gift he gave came with a price tag I couldn't see. And the debt would come back with interest. He said, "No one else would want you." And I believed him. It started small, little comments, casual, almost gentle. Like the way Daniel would say, "You're lucky I found you when I did," or "Imagine where you'd be without me." At first I agreed, because I really was lucky, wasn't I? I had been sleeping behind gas stations, eating scraps, begging strangers for change. And now I had a home. Warm meals, a man who cared. So when he said those things, I nodded, smiled, thanked him. But then the comments changed. They became sharper, quieter, carved into sentences that stayed in my skin long after he spoke them. "Don't get too confident. You were nobody before me. Let's be real, no one else would have put up with you. I gave you everything. So maybe stop acting like you're some kind of prize." I laughed the first time, just to make it less painful, just to make it feel like a joke. But it wasn't. One night I came home late from my new job at a diner. My feet were blistered, my hands smelled like grease. Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table, arms crossed. "You should have texted," he said flatly. "I did," I said. "You didn't reply." He stood up. "Because I shouldn't have to chase you. I brought you into my life when you had nothing, and now you think you can just come and go?" His voice wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than any shout. Because under every word was a message. "You owe me," and I believed him. Because who was I to argue? I didn't have family to go back to. No savings, no college degree. Just a man who reminded me every day that he rescued me. And without him, I'd be nothing. When we went out together, he'd hold my hand tight. Not in love, but in ownership. He picked my clothes, told me not to wear red lipstick because it wasn't classy. Told me not to laugh too loud in public. You don't want people to think you're cheap again, right? Again. That word. Like my past was a scar he could trace whenever he wanted. Once I mentioned maybe taking night classes. He smiled, but not kindly. Sweetheart, let's be honest. You're not exactly built for that. Built for what? I asked, swallowing hard. More. You were made to be safe, with me. This is your place. So I dropped the idea. Like I dropped so many things. My opinions, my dreams, my voice. I used to be grateful. Now, I was quiet. Because when someone saves you from drowning, you don't complain when they hold your head just below the surface. You tell yourself, at least I'm not in the ocean anymore. But slowly, I stopped breathing. And the worst part? I didn't even realize I was drowning again. The wedding felt like a rescue. But it was a cage. He proposed to me on a quiet Sunday morning. No big fanfare. No cameras. Just him holding a ring in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. You've been mine from the day I found you, he said. Let's make it official. I stared at the ring. It wasn't flashy, wasn't fancy. But it sparkled just enough for me to think, maybe this is what healing looks like. I didn't cry, I didn't squeal. I just nodded. Because somewhere deep down, I was still that girl behind the gas station. Afraid to say no to someone who offered her warmth. We had a small wedding. Just a handful of his friends. None of mine, because by then I didn't have any left. I wore a dress he picked. Not white. He said white didn't suit me. It was beige, safe. Something that wouldn't draw too much attention. He didn't smile much at the ceremony. Didn't cry. Just whispered in my ear after the vows. Now you'll never leave. I thought he meant it in a romantic way. Back then, I was still trying to make every red flag look like a rose. The first night as husband and wife, he didn't make love to me. He handed me a list. Household schedule, he said. Now that we're married, things should be more organized. It detailed everything. What time I should wake up? How often I should clean the bathroom? What meals I should cook on which days? I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Marriage is about roles, he said. You're not homeless anymore. Time to earn your keep. That night, I cried in the shower. But I told myself, this is normal. All newlyweds have to adjust. Except it didn't get better. It got worse. He made me quit my job. Said a real wife didn't need to serve burgers to strangers. I take care of us. He said, all you need to do is take care of me. My world shrank. From a city with possibilities to a one-bedroom apartment where I measured days by the sound of his footsteps coming home. He installed cameras in the living room. Said it was for security. But somehow, he always knew when I sat on the couch too long. Or when I forgot to sweep under the table. He took my phone away. Said I was too addicted to screens. He created a new email for me. One he could monitor. I didn't get to keep the old one. Clean slate, he said. Let's erase all the parts of you that didn't serve you. What he meant was, let's erase the parts of you I can't control. One afternoon, I asked if we could get a pet. Just a small dog. Something to keep me company. He looked at me like I'd insulted him. You want to waste time on a dog when you can't even keep the kitchen spotless? Another day, I asked if we could visit my old neighborhood. Just to see the park I used to sit in. To remember that I had once existed outside of him. That place is beneath you now, he said. And besides, what if someone there remembers the version of you I saved? That word again. Saved. It had gone from warm to weaponized. I stopped asking after that. Stopped dreaming, stopped remembering, stopped hoping. Because every time I did, he reminded me, I gave you a life, I gave you a name, I gave you love. But what he really meant was, I gave you a new prison, now decorate it with gratitude. I wasn't a bride. I was a project, a display of his generosity. And as long as I looked grateful, he'd keep me clothed and fed. But love? That was never part of the deal. I once thought he rescued me. But now I realized, he didn't pull me from the fire. He just built a prettier cage around it. Every time I spoke up, he'd say, I took you in. At first, I tried to be the good wife. I cleaned, I cooked, I smiled when guests came, laughed when he made jokes at my expense. This is my little stray I picked up, he once said at a dinner party. Didn't even know how to use a dishwasher when she moved in. Everyone laughed, including me. But inside, I felt like I was shrinking. Still, I didn't say anything, because I thought, maybe I'm just sensitive. Maybe I need to be more grateful. But one day, I forgot to iron one of his shirts. Just one. He came home, opened the closet, and frowned. I've asked for one thing, one. I tried to explain. I was tired. I had cleaned the apartment from top to bottom. Don't talk back, he snapped. I took you in when no one else wanted you. That was the first time. But it wouldn't be the last. When I burned dinner, you know how many girls out there would kill to have a home like this? I gave you that. When I asked if we could see a movie, You wouldn't be watching anything if I hadn't picked you up off the street. When I cried, ungrateful, you should be thanking me every day. His words didn't need to be loud. They carried weight because they came from history. My history. My weakness. My once empty hands. My once frozen body behind a gas station. I started to think I owed him everything. Even my silence. One night, I got a headache so bad I couldn't get out of bed. When he came home and saw dinner wasn't made, he stood at the door, arms folded. I work all day. I come home and you're just lying there? I'm sick, I whispered. Sick? He scoffed. You were sick when I found you, remember? Sick. Alone. Filthy. I still let you in. I cried. Not because of what he said, but because a part of me believed it. Believed that he had reached into a pit and pulled me out. And now, any resistance from me was betrayal. I started apologizing for everything. Even things I didn't do. Even things I didn't feel. I'm sorry I ruined your night. I'm sorry I'm not enough. I'm sorry I'm broken. And every time I said those things, he softened. Kissed my forehead, rubbed my back, said, You're lucky I still love you. I began to see the pattern. He broke me, then comforted the pieces. And that made him feel powerful. I once told him I was thinking of writing again. Journaling. Maybe even taking a creative class online. He laughed. What would you even write about? Sleeping behind dumpsters? You think anyone cares about that? So I stopped writing. I stopped speaking up. Stopped asking for things. Stopped trying to exist in any way that didn't orbit around him. He had become the center of my world. But worse, he made me believe that I had no world without him. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Not the one in the bathroom. The hallway mirror. I paused, stared, and for a split second, I didn't recognize the woman looking back. She looked quiet, faded, like she'd been folded in half, then pressed flat. That night, I asked him, Do you think I'm different from who I used to be? He shrugged. Of course you are. Now you're someone who belongs to something. You should be proud. Proud of becoming less. I went to bed that night with a question circling my brain like a vulture. If you owe someone your life, does that mean you owe them your soul too? He controlled what I wore, where I went, who I talked to. It started with the clothes. Daniel said he didn't like when I wore anything too tight, or too bright, or too short. So I changed. I swapped out my jeans for longer skirts, donated the red dress I used to love, started wearing beige, gray, navy. The colors of blending in. You look more respectable now, he'd say. More like someone I'd be proud to call mine. I smiled, because if he was proud, maybe I was doing something right. Then he said, You shouldn't wear makeup. People will think you're trying to get attention. So I stopped. Mascara, lipstick, perfume, gone. I told myself, this is what real love looks like. Sacrifice, adjustment, obedience. Then came the rules. Small at first. Text me when you leave the house. Don't take the long route to the store. Don't stop and talk to strangers. At first, I thought it was sweet, protective, until I got a message one afternoon. Why did it take you 23 minutes to get back from the grocery store? It usually takes you 17. My heart dropped. I hadn't noticed the time, but he had. I found out he had GPS tracking on my phone. He said it was for safety, but nothing about it felt safe. When I bumped into a woman from my old job, we talked for 5 minutes on the sidewalk. That night, Daniel asked, Who's Jessica? A girl I used to work with. And what exactly were you chatting about? Just catching up. He stared at me, then smiled. Let's not do that again, okay? I didn't argue. Bit by bit, my world narrowed. No more texts to coworkers, no visits to the library unless I told him in advance. No phone calls after 7 p.m. What could you possibly have to say that I can't hear too? He once asked. I deleted my Facebook, stopped answering old emails, cut off the one friend I still had. He said I was lucky. Most men wouldn't want their wives talking to just anyone. I protect what's mine. I started whispering to myself when I was alone. Not full sentences, just words. My name. My favorite ice cream flavor. A memory of my childhood dog. Just to remember I still existed. But even my body stopped feeling like mine. He decided when we were intimate. How we were intimate. And if I said no, don't forget who gave you a roof, who made you worthy. I told myself I could endure. That this was love just twisted. That he didn't mean to hurt me. That maybe I needed fixing. One morning, I made eggs wrong. Too salty. He didn't yell. Just looked at me, disappointed. You used to be more careful. Maybe you're getting too comfortable. Don't forget who picked you up from nothing. That line again. Picked you up from nothing. I looked at the eggs, then at my hands. The same hands that once held onto a blanket in the back of a gas station. The same hands that now trembled while holding a spatula. How far had I come? Or had I just moved from one prison to another? That night, I looked at myself in the mirror, noticing something I hadn't in a long time. I didn't look like me. I looked like someone rehearsing how to exist. And the terrifying part? I didn't know how to escape, because I no longer knew where I ended and where he began. When I tried to leave, he said, "You'd be nothing without me." I don't remember what exactly broke me. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way he looked through me when I spoke. Or the way I had to ask for permission, just to breathe differently. But one morning, as he left for work, I sat on the floor of our kitchen and whispered to myself, "I can't do this anymore." I waited until the afternoon, packed only what I could fit in a small duffel bag, some clothes, the worn-out journal I'd started again in secret, and $32 I'd saved from grocery change. I didn't have a plan. I just needed out. As I reached for the doorknob, my phone buzzed. "Daniel, where do you think you're going?" My blood turned cold. He was tracking me again. I dropped the bag, froze. 2 minutes later, the front door opened. He stood there, not angry, worse, calm. "You were going to leave?" I didn't answer. He stepped closer. "After everything I did for you?" I swallowed. "Daniel, I just need space." He laughed. A low, cuttied sound. "Space? Sweetheart, you didn't even have walls when I met you." I flinched. But he wasn't done. "You think you can just walk out?" "Go where? Back behind the gas station, sleep in alleyways again?" His voice sharpened. "Don't forget, I built you. Everything you have, everything you wear, the food you eat, is mine." I tried to steady my voice. "I'm not property." "Masapikal." He stepped even closer. "Aren't you? You were nothing when I found you. And without me, you'd still be nothing." That word, nothing, like a slap across the soul. I looked him in the eyes and asked, "Do you even love me?" He tilted his head. "Love is for equals. We're not equal, I gave. You received." I felt something in me shatter. Not just pain, clarity. He didn't save me. He collected me. Like a charity project. Like a pet. Not because he loved me, but because he loved feeling needed, powerful, in control. "You don't get to leave," he said softly. "I made you. And I can unmake you." I picked up my bag slowly. My hands shook, but I didn't drop it this time. "Maybe you did pick me up when I was nothing," I said. "But I became something in spite of you. Not because of you." His face went still. I walked past him. 1 step, then 2. He didn't stop me. Because for the first time, he knew he couldn't. I walked for hours that day, found a women's shelter across town. They had 1 bed left. I didn't cry, not that night. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote 1 line. He said I was nothing, but I'm still here. And that means I'm something. I found his notebook and realized I was just his project. I didn't plan to ever go back. But 2 weeks after I left, I got a message from one of Daniel's coworkers. She'd found a box of my things in his office, said if I wanted them, I could come collect them. He wasn't home. At first, I didn't respond, but something told me there might be pieces of me still there that I needed to reclaim. Not physical things, truth. I returned to the apartment like a ghost. The same hallway, the same smell, but it no longer felt like home. Just a place where I used to survive. The box was there, just like she said. Clothes, a worn-out scarf, my old journal. But underneath it all, hidden between 2 books, was a leather-bound notebook. Not mine, his. I knew I shouldn't, but I opened it anyway. And what I found inside made my blood run cold. It wasn't a diary. Not thoughts, not feelings. It was an analysis. Each page filled with notes, dates, charts, about me. Entry. Month 2. Subject responding well to stability. Still shows signs of insecurity. Compliments followed by mild correction, keep behavior compliant. Entry. Month 5. Removed contact with outside friends. Subject didn't resist. Dependency increasing. Recommending next step. Deeper emotional bonding through rescue narratives. Entry. Month 8. Marriage proposal presented as reward mechanism. Subject expressed gratitude, control nearly total. I stopped breathing. Each line was a wound I thought I'd imagined. Each paragraph, proof I had never been loved, only managed, like a lab rat. Page after page, he detailed my behavior. How long I stared at the floor. What phrases made me apologize faster. When I stopped asking questions. He even documented my relapses. Subject displayed resistance after conversation with ex-coworker. Solution. Increased praise followed by subtle guilt-based reminders. I dropped the notebook. My hands were shaking. I hadn't been his wife. I'd been his experiment. It wasn't about love, or even power. It was about control. How far he could go. How much a person could be molded when they were desperate enough to call cruelty safety. I took the notebook with me. Not for revenge, but for proof. Proof that I hadn't imagined it, that I hadn't made it up, that the manipulation had been real. I went back to the shelter that night and showed it to the counselor. She didn't say much at first, just held my hand. Then she looked me in the eyes and said, "What he did wasn't just abuse, it was calculated, deliberate, systematic." I asked her why someone would do that. She answered, "Because when someone has nothing to give, they learn to take power from others instead." And suddenly, I didn't feel stupid anymore. I felt free. I wasn't weak. I had just been chosen by someone who only felt strong when someone else felt small. And now, he had lost me. But I had found myself. I walked out barefoot. But this time on my own terms, I didn't plan to go back. Not really. But healing, I've learned, sometimes requires looking at the fire without letting it burn you again. I stood outside the apartment building, the same one I had once called home, wearing the same shoes I had on the day I left. No makeup, no armor, just me. More whole than I'd ever been. Daniel wasn't expecting me, but that was the point. I buzzed his door, waited. The familiar crackle came through. "Hello?" I didn't say anything. I just walked up the stairs. He had already opened the door. He looked surprised, wary, but not angry. "Not yet." "You're back." I smiled softly. "No, I'm just passing through." He stepped aside. "Do you want to come in?" I looked past him. At the couch where I used to cry. At the hallway where I used to shrink. Then shook my head. "No, I've already been inside long enough." I handed him the notebook. His face changed. Not fear. Recognition. He knew what it was. "You read it?" Every page. Silence. Thick, buzzing. "It wasn't what it looks like," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "So I wasn't a project?" "You didn't track my emotions like data points?" "You didn't measure my obedience in percentages?" He didn't answer. Because what could he say? I took a deep breath. "You didn't break me, Daniel. You bent me, stretched me thin," but I snapped back. He looked at me like I was a stranger. And maybe I was. Because the woman in front of him wasn't afraid anymore. "Why are you here?" he asked. "To say thank you." His eyes widened. "Thank you. For proving that survival doesn't come from being rescued. It comes from deciding you deserve more. And walking away. Even if you have to do it barefoot." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I turned to leave. But before I did, I paused. "I used to think I owed you everything." I looked back at him. "But now I realize I don't owe you even my silence." I walked out. No tears, no second thoughts. And this time, I didn't look back. I walked past the gas station where it all began. 3 years ago, I had curled behind it, cold and invisible. Today, I stood in the sunlight. Visible, real, unapologetically alive. I took a photo of that place. Not for pity, but for proof. Proof that the girl who once had nothing, now had everything that mattered. Self-respect, peace. And her name back. I framed the photo later. Hung it on the wall of my new apartment. Underneath it, I wrote, "You didn't save me, you just gave me the mirror. I saved myself." I built a life without him. And he couldn't handle it. I didn't expect to hear from him again. I had deleted every number, changed every password, moved to a new apartment across town, started over. Quietly, intentionally, peacefully. I was volunteering at a community center now. Working part-time in the library. Writing again. Laughing again. Living again. Then one afternoon, a message came. From an unknown number. "Saw your article. Didn't think you still remembered me." My heart stuttered. I hadn't written about him directly, but the words were there, between the lines. About the cage. The rescue that wasn't. The notebook. The rebirth. I didn't reply. But he wasn't done. The next day, I found flowers at my door. No card. Just a single note. "Let's talk, just once, for closure." I almost laughed. Closure? Closure had already come. In the silence he left behind. In the woman I became without him. But part of me knew. Men like Daniel don't ask for closure. They come back for control. I didn't answer the note. Didn't text, didn't call. I burned the flowers. Then he showed up. I was leaving the library, arms full of books, when I saw him leaning against a lamppost. Sharp suit, cool expression, same smirk. But this time, I wasn't the same woman. "You look good," he said. "I am good." "I read your writing." "I didn't write it for you." He stepped closer. Not threatening, just enough. I just thought, maybe you'd like to talk. It doesn't have to end badly between us. I held my ground. It already ended. He blinked. "I just want to understand how we got here." I looked him in the eyes. "We got here because I stopped believing I owed you my life, just because you didn't leave me to die." Silence. The smirk faded. He wasn't used to this version of me. The version that didn't flinch, didn't explain, didn't need him. "You're different," he muttered. I smiled. That's the point. You know, he said after a pause, I could have exposed your past. I still have those photos, the police report, your record. My stomach twisted for a second, just a second. Then I breathed. Do it. Tell the world who I was, because I've already told them who I am now. He looked at me like I had grown wings. Maybe I had. You don't even hate me, do you? He asked. No, I said. I just stopped letting you matter. And that broke him more than anger ever could. He walked away. No goodbye, no second glance. Just silence. And for the first time in years, I felt entirely, undeniably, gloriously free. He took me in when I had nothing, but I left with everything that mattered. Sometimes people ask me, do you regret it? Marrying him, letting him in? And the truth? No, because he didn't destroy me. He revealed me. He taught me what love is not, what kindness is not, what saving someone should never look like. I used to think survival meant holding on. Now I know, and it means letting go. Letting go of the lies, the guilt, the twisted gratitude that kept me chained to someone else's version of who I was. I now live in a small apartment filled with light. It's nothing grand, no marble countertops, no designer anything, but every corner feels like me. A chipped coffee mug I found at a thrift store. A messy stack of books on the windowsill. A blanket I crocheted myself. Badly, but lovingly. On the wall hangs a frame. Inside it, a photo of the gas station where he first found me. Underneath, I've written, she survived here, but she was never meant to stay there. I work at the women's shelter now, the same one that took me in when I left him. I sit with girls who shake like I used to, who stare at their hands and whisper, I don't know who I am anymore. And I tell them, that means you get to decide. And this time, no one else does it for you. Sometimes I still get scared. Triggers happen. Memories knock on the door when I least expect it. But the difference now? I don't let them in to stay. They pass through. Because this home, this heart, has new locks. And I hold the keys. I've learned that walking away doesn't always feel like a victory at first. Sometimes it feels like failure. Like shame, like emptiness. But give it time. And one day you'll wake up and realize the emptiness is actually space, and space can be filled with your dreams. Your breath, your truth. One morning I stood in front of the mirror. No makeup, no smile, just me. And for the first time in years, I said my own name out loud. I am not what he said I was. I am not broken. I am not nothing. I am survivor, storyteller, reborn. He took me in when I had nothing. But when I left, I took back everything that truly mattered. My voice, my strength, my life. Some people leave scars, others leave lessons. Burn and reborn stories that break you, then rebuild you.